Material for the brain. Conversations for thinking bodies. Hello and welcome to the second season of Material for the Brain podcast, to episode 22. So I'm happy to come back after this extended summer break. It's been 3 months since I've released the latest episode. I took some time to reflect about the podcast project, and I've decided to come back to it with new ideas, new aspiration, new goals, new directions. For today's episode, I've invited David Mordoch, who is a body-mind therapist, a podcast host, and a facilitator of Men's Circle. He's coming from the world of body psychotherapy and Thai massage, and is dancing and practicing contact improvisation. I met David many years ago in one of my seminars, and in the last years, I started to follow his podcast. And I was very impressed and inspired by the conversation that he was facilitating on the podcast. And I wanted to invite him in order to dive into the topic of men's circles and to be able to hear and learn from him about his experiences in facilitating such interesting processes. This episode really touched me on a personal level, especially when we came to talk about my son and my experiences of being a father. And I hope you will find it also inspiring, and it will also touch you and be relevant in your lives. And as usual, I'm very happy to hear your thoughts, your ideas that are coming from listening to the episode, and to keep the conversation open between ourselves. Enjoy. Hello, David. How are you, my friend?
Hello. I'm good. Good to see you.
Welcome to my podcast. I'm very excited to host you here tonight.
Yes, I'm also excited. Thank you for inviting me.
Sure. We've met recently in Israel. I was actually a guest on your podcast in your lovely apartment.
Yes.
And how are you? What is up with you now? I mean, it hasn't been so long, but still I'm curious, like, what are you doing nowadays?
I'm good. It's actually, it's after the holidays here. In Israel, we have a month of holidays, which all work and all daily routine is getting confused. So now we are after this. All children are going back to school. Not that I have, but everything is kind of going back to normal. And it's also the time in the year that I'm opening up circles. So I'm opening up a men group. I have an annual men group that I open once a year. So now is the time that it's gathering.
After the whole Jewish New Year and all this month of festivity. Okay.
Yes.
Cool. And we will definitely dive into that. And also, how's it going with your podcast? I mean, of course, I've experienced it firsthand as being a guest, but how is it going now with the new season?
It's going more slowly. I think when I started the podcast, I was very excited and very much, into it. And it's been almost a year of every week an episode. And I think I grew a bit in it, and now it's my I got into the next stage of the podcasting. Like, when you do something and it's so new, you just want to do it no matter what. But when you starting to really understand something in your doing, it's becoming more complex. So I start to ask questions, like, what am I doing? What am I doing? What is the goals what are the goals I want to reach, and how do I do it? How much energy am I willing to put into it?
Yeah, complicated questions.
Yeah. Suddenly I
Yeah.
have an audience, that I'm a bit more familiar with it, with him. I get responses. I have responsibility, maybe. I don't know.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know if I told you, but I mean, you're kind of you're my. I mean, of course, podcasting is like something that kind of boomed in the last, I don't know, so few years or something. But your podcast specifically was my inspiration to open my podcast, and yeah, and I remember like I was very inspired by the way you were doing it. That for me was something not about you. That was the main thing that I really was inspired about your podcast. And yeah, for the people who are listening to this episode, so maybe you can tell a little bit about what is your podcast about, because I find it extremely special.
Thank you. Wow, it's really, first of all, it's like the biggest compliment ever, that someone is so inspired from what you do that he goes and do it itself. And I can say also that I love your podcast. So to think that it's like something that came out of my doing is really exciting to hear. Yeah, I can tell about my podcast, but it's a bit tricky because I guess everyone that's going to listen to this podcast could not listen to my podcast because it's in Hebrew.
Yeah, maybe I guess maybe 5% of the audience might be able to listen.
But I can tell. Let them envy. Let them envy. So my podcast called, how do I translate? שיעור חופשי.
Yeah, it's I was thinking about it. It's like the direct translation is like a free class, but it has a dual meaning in Hebrew. No? Yeah. Because it's in Hebrew it translates to the time off when you have a free class from it's like
school,
no?
It's like the time at school that you sit after the break, you sit in the class, and the teacher is going to come in, and you wait, and he's late, but you say, okay, probably late, but you start a bit to hope, that maybe he is not coming, but you don't want to put your hopes up, and he's, I don't know, 10 minutes late, and then someone is coming, and they tell you the teacher is not coming, and you have a free class.
Yeah.
So this is that's the name of my podcast, and it's really about learning and about the freedom to learn. I felt that in my beginning of education, I had a lot of compulsory study. Is it the right way to say it? Like it was.
Yeah, we nobody, like children are kind of forced into education to some degree.
Definitely. So, in the house I lived in, education was like the top priority. My parents always like, it's like my job was to get good grades. So I was forced into studying, and I really didn't like it. I hated it. I hated doing my homework. I hated going to tests. I still hate when someone tests me. It's shit. I don't allow no one to test me. Still. But after I gotten bigger and more freer to move around the world as I wish, I discovered that I can study whatever I want. That school can be fun. It's really magic, the ability to learn. I discovered that I can learn whatever I want. That I can practice whatever I want. That I can achieve so much abilities in my life. I can see you do jiu-jitsu. I can achieve ability to do jiu-jitsu. I can see someone, I don't know, playing snooker or doing complicated math. algorithm, I can learn to do it. So it was like a revelation to me that the ability to study something from freedom, from a want, from a will.
Yeah, that's definitely a big one. Like we are sending our kids to, not my daughter, because my son is still not in school, but to kind of it's called like a free school where they are trying alternative methods, how to make the children have first impression on education is something which is fun. So they don't have tests. That's one thing.
Nice.
And they are also have alternative method of how to be in a classroom, because that's one of the things that I think it's very challenging, like this sitting the whole day. And that's something that, for example, when I think about your podcast, and maybe generally about podcasts, but specifically about yours, because yours is very connected to education, is that I can just put my headphone, do whatever I want, and dive into a certain class of something that might be of value for me. And it really kind of flow effortlessly versus this kind of struggle with studying that we experience as kids.
Actually, my transition now to the second season comes from an understanding that the first season was really nice and really, flowing. But I didn't feel like I really created a class in each episode. It was more like a host show, a talk show. So from my vision to create a class, I decided I want to make like take a subject and bring a few teachers to talk about it, and make like a sequence of episodes on one subject. And that is more challenging, but it's much more, I learn much more from it.
And what makes you, that's an interesting question, like what makes you, because what makes you choose a subject or choose a guest? Because I remember when I was following the first season, there was people from various backgrounds, very different, like teachers from really different disciplines. Like, what are you just following your curiosity, or is it things that are really things that touches you personally, or like what guides you?
So first of all, I want to say that I'm having a great time. It's really fun that someone is asking me questions and on a topic that I love so much. So it's it's nice. I'm not used to it. But so podcasting, there is something that is a real bummer, and also bring you a big freedom that you're not paid for it. No one is paying me for this work. So I can do whatever I want. And it's very clear to me that I'm doing this for myself, first of all, and later for my listeners. So the podcast for me is like an excuse or a superpower that makes people that I want to talk to come and talk to me free of charge. Like people that usually, a main subject in my podcast is therapy. So I talk to a lot of therapists, psychotherapists, body therapists, people that if you want to come and talk to them for an hour, it pays, like a lot.
You have to pay.
Yeah, I have to pay them like a lot. So, and now I call them, I tell them, hey, I have a podcast. Do you want to come and sit with me for an hour and a half? And they say, sure, of course. What an honor.
Yeah,
so it's a privilege. So to your question, I totally choose only subjects that I'm interested in. Specifically subjects that I'm interested right now, and even stuff that I'm challenged with in my life at the moment. I believe that the best curiosity is something that you live, something that is present in your life. Like if you want to study how to be a good parent and you don't have children, I think it will be much more challenging. Or you will not have the energy for it. You will not have the will to do it.
Interesting. You know, like when I'm thinking about the subject of learning, something that comes in my mind is the notion of coincidence. Because in this universe of podcasting, which I can really resonate with what you're saying about the following your curiosity and in a way curate your learning experience, so that you're really choosing what's coming when. But when I think about my life and like a lot of the things that I've learned really happen due to coincidence.
Coincidence?
I don't know how is it.
What do you mean by coincidence?
צירוף מקרים.
Yeah, but give an example of coincidence.
You know, like I ended up becoming a dancer, and mainly, because some friend of mine recommended me to go and try a contact improvisation jam. I never heard about it, and it's never occurred to me that I would want to study dance.
Yeah.
And I just went there, and kind of it opened a certain door that if I would have chosen not to listen to this person, maybe I would do something completely different. And in a way, it's like, it's like kind of a meta learning, like you can choose what you want to learn, but there is a certain meta learning by the coincidence that happens to you about, like, because in a way, I don't know, do you feel like that life is a learning process? When you think about your life, is it something that you resonate with? Like, life is about learning?
Definitely. Life for me is mostly about me learning myself. That's the most interesting subject in my school. But also, definitely. Everything is learning.
And what do you mean by learning yourself?
Learning the way I interact in the world, learning the way people perceive me, learning all the complex voices in my head and how to interact with them, learning my powers and my abilities, my gifts to the world, learning my main issues, and the subject that challenged me the most. The where my most learning occurs is where I am most challenged. Yes.
Is there a teacher for that? Because normally, normally when there is a learning, there's a student, there's a teacher. But if life is learning, and we are studying, is there teachers for that? You think, or?
I think there are facilitators for learning, really good ones. But the biggest teacher is life itself. We can talk to each other right now, and we can learn a lot from each other experiences, and someone can listen to this conversation and also learn a lot. But the biggest learning is experience. If a challenge for me is believing in myself, believing that I have something to give in the world, I will have the biggest learning when I will give something to someone and see that it have value, and will actually can see it, when I can experience it, and the stuff that I will find energy in myself to do the most learning are the stuff that is more important to me.
Yeah, I can really resonate it from the perspective of body practitioners, that like certain things I think that you can study on a theoretical level and it can serve you. I don't know, like, I don't know, I'm just thinking like math, like you study it abstractly and you use it abstractly and it serves you. But certain things, I think, as you said, like without the direct experience, it's really like an empty container. And it's definitely like that in my field of practice, the body, that you really have to, you have to experience firsthand in order to embody the understanding, the theoretical understanding. David, like by inviting you in a way, because this is also the first episode that I'm recording for my second season after I took a extended summer break, let's say it like that.
Okay.
And what I wanted to introduce is to bring people who are not primarily working with movement or with the body as their main tool, because that was kind of how I curated the first season.
Mm-hmm.
But our connection is through that, because we met in a seminar of mine, and I know that it's also something that is part of your life. But what brought me the main curiosity inviting you here is what you started sharing in the beginning, the topic of men's work or men's circles that you have been facilitating, as you told me, in the last 5 years?
3 years.
3 years.
3 years.
Now starts the 4th year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's something that has been around me recently from different friends and from different people I know, this term, men's work or men's circles.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we can start with just if you can share your perspective about this phenomena or activity, or what is it? What is men's work?
Okay. First, I want to correct you on something that I do a lot of stuff, but I would say that my main thing is body work. That I do body psychotherapy and Thai massage. Like my most hours of practice and work are working with the body, working with the structure, with the muscles, with the bones. But yeah, I would love to talk about men's work.
Maybe what I meant is like in the first season, I invited people who are practicing movement as a research tool for martial artists, performers, and maybe you're the first person that I'm inviting who is approaching the body from a therapeutic point of view. And in a way, I can imagine that the topic that I want to talk to you about is an extension for that in some degree, no? To some
definitely.
Thank you for the correction.
So what is your ask?
Yeah, like what is it? What is men work? I mean, it's like something that I started to hear more and more.
Okay.
And I wonder, like, if you could start with some explanation of like what is it?
Okay, so I can explain what I am doing. That I never called it men's work, maybe because I'm not talking in English in my daily life. Maybe more good translation will be men circles or men groups. That what we do practically is we have a group of men, usually 14 men, that we meet once a week for 3 hours, and we sit in a circle and we talk and we share our experiences and our feelings and our lives and our challenges. We talk and we listen to each other. We learn from each other experiences. So it's actually a kind of group therapy, but for men. So I'm asking myself which way to go here, because also, you can go to group therapy, and why is that such a big deal? And you can go to why men? Why only men? Give me direction.
Maybe start with why to do a therapy in a group, and then we can understand maybe the differentiation in a men's only space.
Okay. So we want in the work to facilitate learning of oneself and the relationship that he creates in his life. That's the main issue I feel that people come with for healing and for development. Relationships, my closest relationships, challenge that I meet there, sometimes my relationship according to myself and my doing in the world. And when you do ordinary therapy, like one-on-one psychotherapy, you have one person that is there that listens to you, and you bring all the material, and he can maybe show you some aspects of it that you couldn't see, or ask questions that help you figure out dark places that you can enlight, and you can do amazing work there. But you will remain most of the time in the session in a receiving mode. Yeah. So group therapy is, or even group session, is a place that you most of the time will be in a listener mode, because there are a lot more people, and you will start hearing other people's experiences. You will learn much from it, because usually in our daily life, we don't share our most intimate and challenging experiences in our Western world. And when you will share your experiences, your challenges, you will have 13, 14, 15 listeners that will be there hearing you, and it gives you like a big exposure in the world, and a big echo, and you will slowly could see how it's not so terrible, the stuff that you thought that were so terrible, and much more. There is a big power of a group that comes in an intention of acceptance and understanding each other, and going for a process together.
Is the visibility that you're mentioning, like the fact that I'm being seen by others, do you think that it has a major role in, let's say, the healing the healing process? Because when I think about it with my kids, many of the issues that are coming just by the fact that we have space to verbalize them, or to kind of to make them visible, it's already like half of the work is done.
Yes, definitely. I mean, lots of the stuff that we are most ashamed in, we don't talk even with ourselves, you know? And suddenly I can hear another man in the group talks about it, and he don't have a problem talking about it. And I can see that no one is getting scared of it. You know, it could be challenges in sexuality. It could be trauma from the military service. It could be thoughts of hurting myself because I'm so down. And you can, like, stuff that you wouldn't even dare imagining yourself talking with anyone, suddenly you see someone doing. And you get the power, the inspiration to do it yourself, and you also share with the circle, and suddenly something that you've been all your life alone with, suddenly you have a circle of men of support that holds it with you and is not judging you, or even, have experience of it of his own.
And why did you take the decision to create, or what is behind the decision to make an exclusive space which is only for men?
My decision is coming from my own experience, that I been a participant in a group of men, and it was a life changing for me. I think the process that it allowed me to do was a process of feeling more and more comfortable and sure of myself, and specifically in my manhood. You know, I don't know if it's exactly like this in the rest of the world, but in Israel, to be a man is like a thing. Maybe you can tell me about, is it the same in Vienna, the men thing?
Maybe first, because first I haven't been living in Israel for some years, so I'm not. Of course, I know what you mean, but I would be happy to hear in your words what do you mean when you say that in Israel to be a man is something, or like what is it for you?
I don't know. A man need to be strong. A man need to be resilient. He needs to be ready to protect his family from the enemies that are waiting outside the door. It's funny, but most men are going to war here at some point in their life. I grew up in the knowledge that I will participate in a war. And one of the most freeing decisions I've made is the decision that no, I'm not going to be part of the next war. But I've been trained in killing. I know how to shoot a rifle. I know how to move with my soldier mates in a war. It's crazy. So I feel like to be a man here it's have something to do with it. My father, he was a soldier at 2 wars. And he carries it with him till this day.
Yeah. So it's interesting because when I think about it in the context of Austria, so maybe there is a first, I think that the spectrum does reach to the same point also of what you're describing in Israel. So this there are those expression of manhood here as well, and I would say that it goes into a more, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's the same. I don't know. I wanted to say that maybe there is a bit of a wider spectrum of possibilities but I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I think that also in Israel,
No, there is a wide spectrum. I
there is
live
a
in
wide
Tel Aviv.
spectrum.
Tel Aviv is the capital of gay parties and all kinds of gender fluidity.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's very different, but yeah. I read once a book by, I think the writer is called Robert Bly, and the book is called Iron John. I think it was in that book, and he described something like about that. I think it was him. Maybe I'm mistaken, but that I'm citing this author, but he was talking about that manhood is something that you need to achieve every day. So it's never, you never reach a point that your manhood is not being tested.
Yeah.
that you constantly need to reassure it on a social level.
Manhood is something you need to achieve. That's enough.
Yeah. So it was a topic for you, and you said that you decided to initiate it also from the point of a facilitator, not
Yeah.
only the. And what is happening there for your own process?
As a facilitator?
Yeah, like what are you? Okay, so you describe it a little bit, but like maybe you can share a bit more.
What's happening there?
Yeah, for you as a facilitator, and like what are the processes that you've been witnessing? I'm just very curious to.
First of all, there is a really exciting quality about the circle of men that's really quickly, how do you say, להתמסר?
Devoting themselves.
Yeah, devoting themselves, feeling comfortable with one another, opening their hearts. Maybe it got something to do with the fact that there is no women around, that allows us to feel less competitive, and less fight each other. But there is something about a group of men that becomes supportive really quickly, and become really tender and vulnerable really quickly. I think it's got something to do with how much we need and want it. Yeah. So the process that I mainly see is the process of opening up, and from a point that it's really, I ask you, how are you? And you answer really briefly, to a point that I ask you, how are you? And I need to stop you and tell you, okay, the time is up. So that is really exciting to see. And also how a group of strangers becomes a group of brothers. And how much the space can be secure and supportive for people, that to bring their most vulnerable aspects of their lives, of their relationships and history.
Yeah, and I mean, when I think about this subject, I mean, what comes in my mind is like, I mean, many things comes in my mind, but one of them is the topic of loneliness. No, that like why men tend to isolate themselves in a way. Because I heard something interesting, that one of the primary reason why men life expectancy decreases is if they are alone. So if you
men
are
specifically.
Yes, men specifically. So like if you don't have a family, and you don't have a partner, the probability that you will live less increases, and I intuitively can say that being lonely is not something that is healthy.
Definitely. What does it mean to be lonely is a question, I think, by itself. But,
yes, and if I think about it, about myself and about processes that I went, so I think that there is something about the moment you're visible and you're transparent with whoever, then you're not lonely to some degree. Like it, and
when someone sees you.
Yes, and I would say that especially, as you said, in the dark places, because the bright places, it's not so easy to go to a party and smile, but like to not to be lonely with the hardship, it's something that yeah, I wonder, why is it more difficult for men? I mean, yeah. What do you think?
First of all, there is a difference in how we are being brought up. Men are being brought up differently from women. Yeah, I'm not saying better or worse. Each side have its problems and its virtues, but if we put it in a few sentences, men are being brought up to be independent and with their vulnerability needs reduced, attacked, and women are being brought up for to be to be more, how do you say, tlut?
Dependent?
Yeah, more dependent. Which dependency is not something bad. We are all dependent. We are all dependent in our partners, in our families, in our society. We cannot survive alone. But men are being brought up with attack on their dependency and raised to be independent. I just learned the dependent and independent. And women are brought up with the attack to be independent and wow, I'm struggling here. And supposed to be dependent. So that's why there is like a joke about men that they will get lost for hours and will never ask directions. So I can imagine how this affects about men that are lonely. Because if they can't ask for help, if they can't be dependent, if no one sees them and they don't know to ask, hey, please see me, hey, please give me a hug or make me some food or whatever, they will get more and more lonely.
Yeah, it's interesting because in my own process, I feel like, I grew up very much in this loneliness. I even remember that, with my close friend in childhood, we had a certain non-verbal agreement that if we go out partying together somewhere, everyone is for themselves. So we like, don't be dependent that you have to come back with me, because maybe I would end up going somewhere else and I don't want to have any ties to anybody, so I can be free. And in a way, there is a certain relationship between like dependency and freedom to some degree, if many, like now I have kids who depends on me and I depend on them to some extent. So I'm less free. So that's something that I really felt growing up with. And there are also like certain positive virtue for it. And I wonder like what I'm trying to ask is like, why do you think that it's coming now? Or, I mean, I'm sure it's not something new, but it's definitely new in my universe to see the like how common it becomes for men to go into such processes. Like if I'm thinking about my father generation, there were not so many men's circles, men's group in his generation. And now it's becoming something that is not so unheard of. Why do you think that it's happening?
Definitely.
What is happening with masculinity that there is a certain need to talk?
Okay, so first of all, I want to say, we live in a feminist world. Yeah, I live in a feminist world. I think most of our listeners also. And
what do you mean by this?
A world that have a lot of awareness and know how to talk the hardship and the struggles of women in the patriarchy. Yeah? Is that clear?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't agree with everything you said, but it's a good of a definition to follow for now.
Okay. And I see the patriarchy as an issue that hurts everyone. I mean, women and men are hurt from this patriarchy. I don't want to make comparisons, but they are both hurts. Yeah, it's hard for women that they can't be independent. and they need, I don't know, in 20 or it's very delicate subject. I don't want to be mistaken in details, but let's talk about the past. It was hard to be expected to stay at home and raise the children and not pursue your passions and what you want to do in the world, right? But it's also hard to be expected to bring to support your family financially totally, to not be in a close, intimate relationship with your children, to not be involved in the relationship with your children, and even if you want to, step back because you don't know how to do it, and not to be learned emotional and emotional communication with yourself or with your loved ones. And not to be learned how to be vulnerable. So I think we grew up in a world that really know how to talk the women's side, and really women's circle came a lot earlier. At least in my point of view, there were a growth in women's circle much before there was a growth in men's circle. And something is happening now that men are also being expected, but also want to be more present in their families, want to be more truthful and communicative about their emotions with their partners and with their children. They want to be good fathers. They want to deal with their emotional pain. They want to deal with their own trauma, you know. My father, he never once thought to go to therapy to deal with his post-trauma. Because it wasn't culturally muskam, accepted. And now so much, you know, therapy is like everyone goes to a therapist. Yes.
You know, I mean, one thing that I want to, I mean, maybe it's a bit of a sideline, but you know, like, and maybe the reason I'm asking it is because my main interest nowadays is to be able to find center between oppositions.
Yeah.
So there is this notion, you know, like the word patriarchy that is very commonly expressed, like that we are living in a patriarchal societies.
Yeah.
And if you go into more like, you know, radical feminist discourse, the notion is also that, you know, the society's Western world is an oppressive world for women, and that women have no, that women are being oppressed by the system, and that it's a sexist world. And not to say that sexism doesn't exist, for sure. I mean, it exists all over. There are many expressions of it. I have the intuition that there are other reasons why the society had got to this place, rather than this kind of a grand narrative of men having the wish to oppress women. For sure, maybe some men have the wish to oppress women, and I'm sure some women have the wish to oppress men. But when I think about what you've mentioned, like, and I'm just even not going so back into the past, but just looking at, let's say, the short history of the country where we grew up, it feels like that there was a necessity for that, a utility in that, versus then like a decision to do it in order to oppress someone. Like, if I think about, you know, I mean, you said we were brought up to go to war, and it's true that I don't know. I mean, I was serving as a combat soldier, and it seems like that from what you said that you also.
Yes.
But the scale was very different than our parents, who actually had to fight in a kinetic war against, in my case of my father, he was in Sinai fighting against Egyptian soldiers.
Yes.
And then when I think about such a life circumstances, so then there's a certain positive utility with the ability to suppress things.
Mm-hmm.
Because you need to operate, you need to function.
Yeah, survival mode.
Exactly. And then it makes it easier for men to cope with the responsibility that society has alleged to them by being able to suppress emotions, because it's very difficult, I guess, to when I had a conversation with my father, and he told me like crazy stuff about the war in Suez. And
crazy.
And when he tells me the stories, he's telling it really like, like he's not so emotionally disturbed by it. But when I think about my very undramatic stories about the time I've served in the West Bank, I came out traumatized and I needed to process my whole army experience. So in a way, I feel like that the more we are sensitizing ourselves, like the more we can perceive the harm that is happening. Even that the harm, maybe on a certain objective level, is less harm. There's less harm. Or I don't know. What do you think?
I feel very lucky. I look at my parents and I look at my grandparents, and I can see very clearly how much lucky I am. My parents grew up in survival mode. My grandparents, on my mother's side, Auschwitz and stuff, or my father's side came to a new country from Kurdistan. Didn't speak the language. They built a country, and I live so. I have everything I want. I never been one day hungry in my life. I don't need to deal with survival. So I have this luxury to go to therapy and break this trauma chain that my ancestry brought to me. And I'm not saying this in accusation to them. I am very much lucky to be the one in my dynasty that have the opportunity to do that work, to start working with the trauma, start to do the healing work. So I will not bring it, or at least I won't bring all of it to my children. And I think all of that is a big part of this change we see in this masculinity.
And to what end do you think, like why do you think it's important to, like, I will ask it kind of, maybe it's naively, because when I think why to deal with trauma, why to heal trauma, it's almost like obvious. No,
yeah.
Why not? It sounds good. But if I think about, the ability to, there is a certain utility to resiliency, no? And
utility
like shimushiyut.
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
And to some extent, what I'm trying to ask is like, there's a lot of things in, let's say, in this kind of division between the masculine and the feminine that we can definitely say, look, these are the untouched territories of masculinity, or unvisited territories, like vulnerability, like dependency, like emotional sharing, etc., etc. And then we kind of, when we ask like, why don't we visit those territories? It's because we are so busy with resiliency, independent. Then those qualities kind of are put in a negative light. But what I'm asking is like, what is the ability, like, there are utility for those qualities. So can you go through a therapeutic process and not lose them? Like still be able to be strong, resilient,
Yeah,
And
yeah, for sure. I mean, the problem is not the resilience. The problem is the enslavement to resilient. I want to be free. I want to be free to be vulnerable or resilient, according to my choosing and how secure I feel. I want to be free to put strong borders, and when someone trying to enter my space, telling me no, this is my space, you out. And also I want to have the freedom when someone enters my space to tell him, yes, please come in. I want you in with me. And trauma mostly make us enslaved to resilient. And that is, I think, the biggest part of what leaves us alone.
And when you mean enslave, you mean that you just don't have a choice and you have to default to it, or that you only feel comfortable in it?
That you have defense mechanisms that you don't choose. Defense mechanisms that you learn that you developed in times that you didn't have the awareness or choice of in how to deal with a very hard situation, and they become automatic. So when someone new or comes to your life and wants to come closer, the defense mechanisms are working whether you like it or not.
When you speak about pattern and this, like for me, it's very easy to relate it to, let's say, my practice as a dancer, and and I think like there is a certain quest, let's say, in the world of contemporary dance to always be aware of your pattern and always have the ability to come out of your pattern.
Yeah, we have innate attributes, that they are mostly coming from our automatic patterns. We don't want to lose them. I don't want to lose them, but I want to be able to learn new pathways.
Yeah, maybe I have because I went through, let's say, quite radical shifts in my own personal life. I started growing up in Israel like most people, and I think that I had a certain sensitive quality that I really kept quite internal, and I didn't expose it so much. And I was surrounded with the typical Israeli macho boyhood, trying to impress the ladies and being successful in the mating competition. And after the army, when I discovered dance, I went into a radical 180 degree with like kind of becoming sensitive to my body, learning how to express myself. Also in Vienna, like I would say, like diving a lot into feminist discourse and understanding also like on a theoretical level what is the other side thinks, let's say, if I put it in those terms. And now when I'm 38 and I have my own kids, I find myself kind of coming back into a more central place and asking myself the question of like, but what about the good things about those qualities? Like, is it possible really to learn how to place clear boundaries and how to say no without developing at all some hardness? Like, I'm asking it, I don't know.
Hardness is not a problem. As I said, resilient is not a problem. I don't think so. I want to be hard sometimes. But I also want sometimes to be incredibly soft. The world is not only tender, sometimes I need to be harsh and to be assertive. There are hard things out there. I don't, I'm not naive. I'm not so naive. But, if someone is trying to hurt you, and there are people that will try to hurt you sometimes. I want to have the ability to defend myself and to defend the people I love. I want to be able to be angry and to act out this anger.
But do you see an alternative path that you can act in such a way that doesn't cause any trauma? Because maybe it's different when you're an adult and you say when you're younger and you don't know anything else. So I can imagine myself, now being angry on something that bothers me in the world and doing it in a way that is constructive. But I really wonder if it's not kind of inevitable that part of life is to experience trauma. And maybe I'm asking it because I wonder if it's not, we started the conversation but saying that life is learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if and now I feel like that there is a lot of like voices that something needs to change in how men are in the world.
Something is changing.
And something is changing as well. And what I'm asking myself is like, what are the, let's say, inevitable traumas that we just have to go through as human beings as part of our learning experience? And what are the things that are fundamentally adjustable that need to be changed? Because when I think about my kids, I'm maybe a more sensitive or a refined version of my parents, but there's definitely, I see that, like they are not free from trauma. So like, to what end are we doing the process?
I'm not sure I'm following you. What are you asking?
Yeah. What am I asking?
Can we avoid trauma?
Let's start with this. I don't think that we can avoid trauma.
I think first of all, trauma is a spectrum. It's not yes and no, black and white. And I can say for myself, I'm willing to experience hardships, but it will be very much important to me to be there afterwards and process them, and to be loved and to be understandable. So I think I don't think it's possible to be perfect parent or a perfect partner. We hurt each other in life. That's part of the meaning of relationships. We hurt each other and we learn from it. But as long that we have the possibility to talk about it and really understand each other later, so we can learn from it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I follow what you're saying. Maybe I think I'm facing right now in my life a certain new thing that, as a young person, I feel that I want to react to the world by changing it.
Mm-hmm.
And now in the last maybe year and a half, 2 years, I suddenly find myself on the conservative side where I'm saying like, hey, wait, don't touch this. This is important. And one thing that I'm asking myself specifically about the topic of manhood is like, can we really do the process of sensitizing ourselves without losing the hero archetype?
We don't want to lose it.
That's what my intuition tells me, like that being a hero, and I don't mean being a hero, let's say, in a kind of like Hollywoodic, individualistic way of the man, the Rambo who saves the world, but I mean hero in the sense of, having courage to face adversity, having the courage to face challenges, that that you might even have to go through traumatic experience, and you do have the courage to enter there. And I think that to some degree, when like I will give you the simplest example. I've been dancing for many years, and now I feel like my body in such a way that when I go to jiu-jitsu practice, which is a much harder practice, I really sense what I'm doing to my body,
Mm-hmm.
And to some degree, when you have less awareness to your body, you don't even notice the amount of stress you're putting on your body. It's just like you're not that sensitive. You don't feel it. So you don't feel it. And it's like, it's much easier. It's not that of a challenge.
Ignorance is a bliss.
To some extent, you can say it like that. And maybe it's not ignorance. It's just like the scale of sensitivity, like, so I'm relatively in a more refined experience than the average guy who goes to a jiu-jitsu gym. But with this refinement, of course, there's some advantage to it, but there's also, it's harder for me to reach the extreme hard version that sometimes I required for that practice. And I really see the equivalent to it in life. I really feel like that. I don't know if I will ever have the capacity to be able to defend my country in a war. Because I got in such a sensitive place. I cannot imagine myself, and I asked myself several times, because in Israel, I took the choice of avoiding being in the reserve army.
Me too.
So I went to a process. I went to a psychologist and I went out. I'm not part of the reserved army. But on a metaphorical space, I do want to have the ability to defend my family if I need to do it. But I'm in such a sensitive place that I don't know if it's something that I'm still capable of. And that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Is it really a process where we can grow in both directions, or when you become more sensitive, you're automatically reducing your capacity to be very harsh?
Yeah. It's I think it's a very complex question. I mean, do you feel in jiu-jitsu that you hurt yourself? Is that what you mean?
I mean, yes, for sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe maybe I'll give you an example, like that you can understand maybe on my point. Like, so I really enjoy going to jiu-jitsu in the studio, and there I can sometimes really go for the max effort and really challenge myself. And then I went 2 times to competitions just to experience it. And in competition, there is no game anymore. It's really like the essence of the competitive energy.
Yeah. Fight.
It's a fight in a environment which is hyper masculine.
Yeah.
And there I shrinked.
Yeah.
I wasn't shining anymore. And I remember that my coach, because I'm a dancer, I was relatively talented in learning the movement. So he was like saying to me, yeah, we have Matan, the secret weapon of our team. He's a very good white belt. And then I lost in the first match that I tried very quickly.
You got scared?
And I didn't. Yeah, I was very stressed, and then I went again to a competition to kind of have a different experience, trying to find my calmness in it. But I did see that that I definitely didn't develop that quality of really being able to stand in the midst of the harshest storm with this very harsh competitive aggression, and there be calm and playful. That's something that I don't have the ability. And I attribute it to some degree to my life choice of going into the realm of sensitivity.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I believe that if you will have to, your system will know how to make you less sensitive. You will get into fight or flight experience. You will fight or flight. With the
or freeze.
Or freeze, I guess. But I know what my father did in the wars he fought. I don't know if I will be able to sit here now with you if he didn't do it, or he and his friends would protect this country. I don't know. But now in the reality that I live in, I genuinely don't believe that I need to kill anyone in order to protect my country. And that is part of my being lucky. And maybe naive also. But
yeah, but that's a big question.
In the end, I want to deal with the reality I live in. I live in a secure home that the door is locked when I want it to. When I go down to the street, I meet mostly people smiling to me. Again, I'm privileged, yeah? But this is the reality I live in, and this is the reality I want to be the best myself I can. I can imagine adversities that other people need to deal with and train myself to them, but that doesn't feel, it's the same thing we talked about in the beginning. I learn from the stuff that meets me in my life. If I will need to learn to fight, I know I can do it. But now I need to learn how to communicate with people I love. That is the stuff that challenge me in my life. That is the adversities I meet.
Yeah, because I feel like that to some extent, what I feel like that in a way, like now we are living in the less, at least in the Western world, we are living in the least violent period of human history ever.
For sure, by far.
And yeah, I'm thinking about the things we take for granted, just that you can kind of walk with some, like kind of having some goods, like stuff on you, and that nobody just stop you and brutally take everything you have, and like many other things that like are not obvious in this kind of peaceful environment. And to some degree, I think that the fact that every society in like the history of mankind, I mean, I would say that maybe it's not but the majority of societies chose to sacrifice men into war, which you can maybe argue that it's because of like biological reason, men have stronger bodies, whatever, but that it's kind of, I mean, that
doesn't
was kind
matter.
of
Doesn't matter.
effect of life. Yeah. And so like this is kind of that's kind of a very important sacrifice that men have been doing, and in a way, the fact, like in Israel, the fact that we can have women serving as a combative soldier is maybe a lot related to technological advancement, because you don't need to be just with strong upper body muscle to wave a big axe or whatever. But like I feel like that if we are completely it's giving these qualities in a world where not everybody is doing it, it's an interesting situation. And I'm asking myself, is the idea of really abandoning this harsh version of masculinity, if it's not a certain desire for a utopia that doesn't really happen simultaneously? Because I would be the first one to vote for like all the men in the world, we go together to therapy and we learn how to deal with aggression differently. But in a world where not everybody is interested in that, then I'm asking myself like, hey, what happened when I'm sensitizing myself so much while the other person keeps doing push-ups, And I also see it in the gym, like practically, I don't go and lift weight. I don't work on being stronger. And there are guys who are like just trying to be the strongest in the gym.
So you actually ask, you imagine stuff. Really, you talk about imaginary stuff. The challenges I meet and the people I love meet are challenges of communication and relationships. That's the world I live in, you know. And now we can ask ourselves, okay, but if I will gain what I need in order to face these challenges, and then someone will come and try to kill me, will I be weaker? You know, it's like theoretical.
Yeah, for sure, you know, for sure it's theoretical, but I feel like that maybe what I'm pointing is that in this process of, let's say, hardening yourself, there are certain qualities that are also valuable to my day-to-day life, which I wonder how could I achieve them, those qualities, without going through this process. And that's something that, you know, I constantly struggle with my son. Like, you know, I want him to be able to put his emotion aside when we have to do something difficult, and not in a way that like to suppress them, but to say like, okay, now I feel this and that, and yeah, I breathe into that, and I have trust that I can go through that challenge. But I'm not just going into a space where I'm busy with sensing what is going on. I can also operate. And where I am now is in a little bit of a binary place where I see it a little bit kind of as a dichotomy of either or.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's what I'm asking. Do you, from the work you've done, you feel like that? Can you unlock this dichotomy?
I'm not a parent myself, and I know it sounds very challenging, but I know when you tell this situation, what my interest is, why you want him to anything, and what does this triggers in you, like what is the emotional challenge or stuff you meet in this situation.
Yeah, I guess that to some extent, like the simplest answer is like that there is a certain, I mean, we talked about that, that in our world, we don't need to deal so much with survival. But to some extent, having kids is creating some kind of an extension to this phenomena, because now you have some offspring that you need to make sure that they will survive, and you see them also struggling. So you get a bit of a sense of that. So then it's like I'm asking myself, what is the toolkit that what are the tools that are in the bags of my kids that I can use?
So in other words, you get scared.
Yeah. I don't, scared, or I have concern, as you said, like kind of maybe because I'm not naive and I know the world can be harsh, because I've experienced it. I want them to have the tools to confront the harshness in a way that will be the best for them.
Yeah. So I would say deal first with your concern, and try to see where you can give that space. I mean, I know I have experienced diversity and harshness in my childhood, and I'm sure it gave me a lot. It gave me a lot of ability to deal with diversity, but it also gave me a lot of pain. Pain that I...
Sorry, you meant adversity?
Yeah, what did I say?
Okay, diversity, and then I was like, you mean... Okay,
adversity, thank you.
Yeah.
But it also gave me a lot of pain. I mean, I'm sure you can trust the world that it will show your son harshness. You can give him harshness, and first, and he will learn how to deal with it. If you give him harshness, he will learn how to deal with it. And then when he come out to the world, I don't know, will he deal with it better? Maybe. Maybe the way to deal with harshness is the knowledge that I have a loving supportive father that will be there for me when I need to process it.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, for me, it's always easier again, like to have these analogies to the physical body, and like, I mean, one practice that is really much about that, I would say, is Aikido. The ability to have something very aggressive coming into your space, and you, with the least amount of resistance, just direct it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I mean, and in a way, like, that's something I would say that maybe is kind of could be also practiced on a mental level, but yeah, I don't know. I'm really, it's something, I've been thinking a lot about it because of this maybe kind of radical change that happened to me from living in Israel, as you said, like in an environment where we are where we are still confronted with those needs from men to be that harsh, and like ending up in Europe in a very, very extremely different environment in a dance school.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're like asking those, what is the middle point in all of that? What is the middle ground that we can reach?
I'm a believer. I believe that life is essentially good. And I believe that from love and caring, we get strength, and not the other way around. I believe that the strength we get from harshness and from violence is very fragile. And the true power comes from being connected to the ground, to the nature, and being connected to the people, to my community, and be connected to myself, to my body, to my strengths, to my heart, to my feelings. My feelings are not, being connected to your feelings is not vulnerability only. Vulnerability is not weakness. True connected anger is very powerful. True connected sadness is very powerful. True connected happiness is very powerful. Violence and hatred are forms of weakness and pain. And they are much more fragile in my experience.
Yeah. I can resonate it with my own life on a personal level. That when I'm violent, I'm not in a good place. And
You're not in your center.
I'm not in my center. But I would say, like, I mean, I'm saying but, not because there is but to that. That's kind of obvious. But I think that what underlines it is that I'm living in an environment that is kind of abundant, and not in an environment that I don't confront scarcity. So there's not lack of resources. Nothing is pushing me to become violent. So when I become violent, it's mainly because of my disability to contain a challenge which is not really life and death challenge, like it's really like lack of emotional capacity to handle the challenge. So maybe that's the answer for my question, like why we need the men work.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said about the jiu-jitsu competition, when something really was a bit too much for you, it stopped you. You didn't have the ability to remain relaxed and present and playful. And maybe if you could remain, in your center, remain connected to your roots, remain playful, maybe you could win this competitive masculine environment. I mean, it's true strengths.
Yeah, and
it could
that's something that I definitely see in some competitors. That good competitors are people who really maintain a sense of playfulness, and a sense of true aspiration for overcoming themselves, like and not to just dominate the others, like those, like, and several athletes comes in mind when I think about this kind of, like, I want to be the best version that I can, and my opponent is just giving me an opportunity to discover this inside of me.
He's helping me learn.
And in a way, I think that the domain of competition, it's, I mean, I don't think that it's just reserved for men. I think that everybody competes to some extent in their life in different situations. Life has competition is part of life. I think that maybe just as you said, that men, we tend to start there, like, okay, if you put a group of men in a room, on average, maybe they will first have the default of seeing the space as competitive before they kind of soften up and say, okay, it can be also supportive. But maybe it's also a personality thing, because I know also guys who are extremely cooperative and not competitive, that they will not see a space like that.
Yeah, mostly those guys will be very much sure in themselves, very much comfortable, and knowing their strengths.
Interesting. Yeah. David, it's really a pleasure to speak to you. And I think this conversation also, in a way, enabled me, maybe your presence enabled me to be more vulnerable, and also to experience vulnerability about different topics, especially when I speak about my children, about how I grew up. And I want to thank you for that. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, for me too. Thank you.
And I want to give you some space, maybe just to share for those who might be in Israel and are interested in hearing more about the things you're doing, and
with pleasure.
Maybe have a chance to interact with you in different situations.
So the stuff I do is I do men groups, and also now I'm opening a group for men and women. That is also annual. Actually, all of my groups are closed annually, so you don't really have the chance to join unless you come for a year to Israel, but then it's also in Hebrew, so problem. I do also private sessions of Thai massage and body psychotherapy, and also I have a podcast which is also in Hebrew. But that's it. That's what I do.
I bring a lot of Israeli guests, so eventually my audience will understand that learning Hebrew will have some utility in their lives.
Definitely. So much abundant of teachers here in Israel.
Totally. David, thank you again for coming here.
Thank you. It was a pleasure for me.
And I really hope to have a chance to converse with you again in the future.
Me too. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night.
If you want to see more precious and insightful moments, make sure to check our short clips playlist. To see longer interviews, check out the full episode playlist just below it. And to be notified for all future videos, click the subscribe button and don't forget to hit the notification bell. See you on the next episode.